Okay, welcome back. This is the answer key for the week 6, chapter 11 and 12 reading quiz. The first question asks, which measure of risk most closely measures the risk faced by the single project proponent? Well, on one of the pages there in the book, we talk about the different perspectives, 5 different perspectives on risk. As a single project proponent, you have the total risk. This is best measured by the standard deviation of the project. The CEO of the company is going to have different projects within the company. When you have different projects offsetting each other, then the correlation coefficient is a good measure. And then when you're a well diversified shareholder, where the company is only one among many companies that you're going to own, the beta of the company is the best measure of risk. So, risk, the appropriate risk measure really depends on your perspective. So, again, that's in the book towards the end of chapter 11. Number 2, true or false, beta measures the diversifiable risk of the project, company, or industry, and not the non-diversifiable risk. That's a false statement. Beta measures the risk that will not go away, or the non-diversifiable risk. Which statement is truer? Well, a lot of people fall into this risk-averse investor will not accept risk. That's not correct. A risk-averse investor will accept risk, but they must be compensated to do so. So answer B is correct. Question 4. For the same project, which measure is usually lower in units to break even? It's the income break even level of sales. The net present value break even level of sales is going to be higher because you're covering your initial outlay costs in addition to the annual outlay costs. Number 5, a risk seeking individual enjoys risk and pays to take risks. This answer A does not care about risk and would have no preference between high risk project, low risk project. That's actually a risk neutral person. What do you call the risk management technique where you start out small and expand if demand proves itself instead of investing large for all potential demand? That's sequential investing. We talk about it in the book. Give an example where you might use experimentation to derive probabilities. A lot of you gave me a coin toss and a roll of dice. That really isn't experimentation. Experimentation is where you do test markets, pilot projects, stuff like that, where you cannot really test demand or preferences or whatever, so you experiment. A coin toss really isn't an experiment unless you're testing the legitimacy of the coin. But in business, when Campbell Soup tests a certain flavor of soup in the South versus New England, they're doing test markets, kitchens, stuff like that. That's example of where experimentation would be used by a business to derive the best taste preference for a certain locale. How do you calculate the expected net present value? You take the possible net present values times the probability of that net present value happening. When using simulation, does the computer or modeler supply the probabilities for the different model input variables? The modeler does, and that's why simulations are gaining in popularity, but again, they're only as good as the modeler's input. They supply the input variables. Some of you gave the answer that the computer supplies the probabilities after they run the simulations. That is an output probability of usually the expected net present value or whatever you're modeling. But again, you have to supply the input, the probabilities of the input variables to let the machine do the Monte Carlo or whatever type of simulation you're doing. Problem 10, you're negotiating compensation, or question 10, negotiating compensation with your potential branch manager and give her 2 options. related to compensation. The first method is that she will receive 40,000 and 2% of the profits. Second model is that she will receive 90,000 fixed. Assume both methods will result in the same pay given your calculations of most likely level of sales. Which of these two methods lowers the risk for you and your organization? It would be the first method because again, the if we do not do a level of sales, the compensation would be lower, offsetting some of the risk. With a fixed payout of 90,000, it's 90,000 whether you do great sales, normal sales, or low sales. So usually you're trying to pass off risk because you're worried about not being able to cover the low situation rather than having to share the high situation. Even though uncertainty is different than risk, the in this case you're lowering your risk if you go with the first option. Okay. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you have any questions.